She had been pouring drinks for 3 hours when the laughter started. Two Navy SEALs at the corner table had been drinking since 7. By 9:30, they'd run out of things to say about each other and started looking around for something easier. Their eyes landed on the faded tattoo on the inside of Olivia Hart's left forearm. A small, strange symbol, angular and deliberate. The kind of mark that didn't belong in any flashbook or Instagram grid. One of them nudged the other. Then came the snickering. Then came the comment loud enough for the whole bar to hear. "Hey, sweetheart, what is that supposed to be? Your ex's initials? A drunk mistake?" Olivia didn't stop wiping down the bar. She didn't flinch. She didn't look up. She just kept moving. That mark had been pressed into her skin in a field hospital east of nowhere by a man with shaking hands and a dying flashlight, while artillery was still falling 2 kilometers out. It was not a mistake. It was the only promise 5 people ever made to each other, and only 5 people in the world would ever understand what it meant. One of them had just walked in through the front door, but nobody in that bar knew that yet. If this story already has you gripped, follow along to the very end. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment with the city and country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The Anchor and Nail was not a glamorous place. It sat on the edge of Ravenport, Colorado, in a strip of commercial blocks between a pawn shop and a tire depot, with a hand-painted sign that had been fading since 2009 and a parking lot that flooded every spring. The clientele was mostly local, retired mechanics, off-duty deputies, the occasional long-haul trucker who'd gotten off I-70 looking for something other than a chain restaurant. On Friday and Saturday nights, when the military base outside town granted weekend passes, it filled up with younger faces, louder ones. Olivia had worked the night shift there for 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. She knew every creak in the floorboards. She knew which taps ran slow and which regulars tipped in cash and which ones always claimed they'd left their wallet in the truck. She knew how to read a room, who was getting too loud, who was about to cry into their beer, who needed to be cut off before things got complicated. She was good at her job. She was quiet about being good at it. At 36, she had the kind of face that made people guess her age wrong in both directions, lean and weathered around the eyes, but steady in a way that made her seem younger when she smiled, which wasn't often. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid that had come half loose by 8 o'clock. She wore a plain black t-shirt, the same one she wore every shift, because it was the right weight, and she didn't like thinking about clothes. The tattoo on her forearm was always visible. She never covered it. She didn't consider it a conversation piece. Most nights, nobody noticed it. Tonight was different. The group had come in around 7, 5 of them, mid-20s. The kind of young that still believed confidence was the same thing as competence. They wore civilian clothes but carried themselves the way people do when they've recently been told they're exceptional. Which, to be fair, they probably were. Navy SEALs were not ordinary people. Olivia had worked alongside enough of them to know that. The problem wasn't what they were. The problem was what a handful of them became on a Friday night with $12 worth of whiskey in them and nobody watching. The one who'd spoken first was tall, square-jawed, with the kind of easy grin that worked well in rooms where nobody pushed back. His name tag, when he'd been ID'd at the door, said Vance. Mason Vance. He'd handed over his military ID with the practiced boredom of someone who expected it to impress people. Olivia had handed it back without comment. That had annoyed him. She'd seen it, a flicker across his face, quick and small, the particular irritation of someone unaccustomed to being unremarkable to other people. He'd taken his ID back and turned to his group and said something low, and 2 of them laughed. She'd gone back to pulling drafts. By 9 o'clock, the bar had settled into its usual Friday rhythm. A group of veterans in the back playing cards, a couple at the far end of the counter talking quietly, the TV above the bar cycling through sports highlights with the sound off. Olivia was restocking the speed rail when she heard Vance's voice carry across the room with the particular volume of a man who's had enough to drink to stop editing himself. Seriously, though, what is that thing on her arm? She kept her back to them. Looks like something a kid drew, another voice said. Younger, trying to match Vance's tone. I've seen better work at a county fair. Laughter. Hey! Louder now, directed at her. Hey, bartender, What's the tattoo? Some kind of tribal thing? Your high school boyfriend do that in his garage? The bar got a little quieter. Not completely. The card game in the back kept going. But the couple at the end of the counter had stopped talking. The regulars were pretending to look at their phones. Olivia turned around. She picked up the rag. She walked the length of the bar to where Vance's group was sitting, and she looked at him, just looked at him, with the particular stillness of someone who has been in rooms where the wrong response gets people killed. "You need anything else?" she said. Vance blinked. He'd expected something different. Annoyance, maybe, or a flush of embarrassment. What he got was a woman who looked at him like he was a medium-distance weather event she was deciding whether to bother tracking. "I was just asking about the tattoo," he said, less certain now. "I heard you," she said. She waited. He filled the silence the way insecure people always do. It's kind of a weird one, never seen anything like it. What does it mean?" "It means something to me," she said. "You want another round or not?" There was a beat. One of the other seals, a shorter one with a shaved head, let out a quiet sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a signal to stop pushing. Vance ignored it. "That's a non-answer," he said. "That's the only answer you're getting," she said. "Whiskey or beer?" She held his gaze for exactly 2 more seconds, then turned and walked back down the bar without waiting for his response. Behind her, she heard him mutter something to his group. More laughter, quieter this time, with a sharper edge. She refilled a regular's draft. She sliced a lime. She did not let herself think about the symbol on her arm, or what it had cost, or who else in the world carried one. She did not let herself feel anything about the way Mason Vance had said weird one, with his nose slightly wrinkled like it was something she should be embarrassed by. There were nights in the early months of working here when she had been, or not embarrassed exactly, but aware of it in a way that stung. The tattoo was strange looking, she knew that. It didn't fit any tradition or culture a person could point to. It looked like a symbol from a language that didn't exist because it was invented in the field, under pressure, by people who needed something that couldn't be reverse engineered by anyone looking at a database. When she'd first come back to civilian life, she'd worn long sleeves for nearly a year, not from shame but from exhaustion. She hadn't wanted to explain it, and she'd known she never could explain it, not the real story, so the easiest thing had been to hide it. Then one day she'd stopped hiding it, not as a statement, not as a reclamation, just because she'd gotten tired of adjusting her wardrobe around other people's confusion. The mark was there. It would always be there, and the handful of people who mattered, who would ever truly understand what it was, were scattered somewhere in the world, carrying their own versions of the same scar. She wondered sometimes if any of them had found their way to ordinary lives the way she had, if they worked quiet jobs in small towns and told themselves it was enough. Most nights she believed it was. She heard the bar's front door open and felt the November cold push in before it swung shut. She didn't look up immediately. She was mid-pour, and looking up mid-pour was how you ended up giving someone 3 ounces instead of 2. She finished, set the glass down, pushed it across the bar, and looked toward the door. The man who had just walked in was wearing his Navy dress uniform. Rear Admiral, 2 stars. The combination of age and bearing that meant he hadn't worn that uniform for ceremonial effect in a long time. The posture was too settled in, too absent of self-consciousness. He wasn't performing authority. He just had it. He was maybe 60, white-haired, with the kind of face that had been through enough to stop pretending about anything. He stood just inside the door for a moment, adjusting from the cold, scanning the room with the unhurried efficiency of a man who had been trained to read environments fast and had never stopped. His eyes moved across the bar in a single sweep. Then they stopped. Not on the SEALs who had noticed him and straightened involuntarily, not on the card game, not on the TV, but on Olivia. Or more precisely, on her arm. She felt it before she fully processed it. A change in the room's gravitational field, some internal alarm system that hadn't fired in years suddenly tripping to attention. She looked at the Admiral. He was already walking toward the bar. He walked past the SEALs table without acknowledging them, which for Mason Vance's group registered as something between confusion and offense. Officers at his rank did not typically pass right through a group of junior enlisted without a nod, but the Admiral wasn't looking at them. He reached the bar. He stood directly across from Olivia. He looked at her for a moment, not unkindly, but with the weight of someone trying to confirm something they'd thought was impossible. "What did you put in your coffee this morning?" he said quietly. It was a strange thing to say. It was exactly the right thing to say. Olivia's hand stopped moving. That phrase, that precise, unremarkable, ridiculous phrase, chosen in the early hours of March 14th, 2018, as a verbal recognition marker because it was unmemorable enough that nobody would ever think it was anything but small talk. She hadn't heard it in 6 years. She made herself breathe. She made herself look at him. "Whatever they gave us," she said, which was terrible. The Admiral closed his eyes for 1 second, opened them, and for the first time since he'd walked through the door, something in his face changed. Something tight, releasing, like a knot letting go. "I heard you were in Colorado," he said. "I didn't know if the information was right." "It's right," she said. Behind him, at the corner table, Mason Vance was watching this exchange with the particular attention of someone who sensed the atmosphere had shifted but couldn't figure out why. He leaned toward the man next to him. "You know that officer?" The shaved-head SEAL, his name was Kowalski, she'd caught it when they'd ordered, shook his head slowly, still watching. The Admiral glanced down at her arm, the tattoo, the mark that Vance's group had spent the last 2 hours treating as a punchline. "They give you any trouble about it?" he said. "Not more than usual," she said. He made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "You still working the medical side?" "Night nursing," she said. "Clinic across town, 2 days a week. Bartending fills the gap." He nodded like she'd confirmed something. "You're better than this," he said, and he didn't mean it as an insult to the bar or the work. She heard it for what it was. A grief, almost. The waste of a particular kind of capability sitting on a slow Friday night in Ravenport, Colorado. "I know," she said. "I'm okay with it." He studied her for a moment longer. Then he took off his jacket, his dress jacket, the one with the stars on the shoulder, and laid it over the bar stool. He rolled up the left sleeve of his shirt, slowly, deliberately. The bar had gotten quieter. People were watching without trying to look like they were watching. On the inside of his left forearm, faded with age but unmistakable in its angular precision, was the same mark. Vance's group went completely still. "March 2018, the Admiral said, quietly enough that it was mostly between the two of them. "Carava Province, the worst 72 hours of my career." He paused. "Of my life." "Mine too," Olivia said. "I've been trying to find all 5 of you," he said. "2 confirmed. 1 went off grid entirely. 1 we lost." His voice stayed level, but something behind the eyes flinched on that last word. "You're the 4th. Olivia said nothing. She looked at the mark on his arm for a moment. The same imperfect lines, the same slight asymmetry on the upper right, because the hand that had made it had been shaking with adrenaline and blood loss, and the specific terror of people who know the cavalry is not coming. "How'd you find me?" she said. "VA records initially, then a contact in Denver, then a bartender in Glenwood who said there was a woman in Ravenport with a tattoo he'd never seen before." She almost smiled at that. "People notice." "The wrong people, usually," he said. He said it plainly, not as an accusation toward the table in the corner, but the meaning landed there anyway. She saw it reach Mason Vance's face, the slight shift, the beginning of something uncomfortable working its way in through the confidence. Olivia picked up a glass, refilled her own water because her hands needed to be doing something. She had not shaken in years. She was not going to shake now. "What do you need from me?" she said. "Nothing urgent tonight," the Admiral said. "I came to make sure you were real, to tell you in person that what happened in Carava Province, what all 5 of you did, is going to be formally recognized. Finally, we've been fighting the classification status for 3 years. He paused. "It's done. The record is being corrected." She heard the words. She let them sit. "Okay," she said. He blinked. He'd expected more of a reaction, maybe. "Okay?" "I've been living with it for 6 years without recognition," she said. "The record changing doesn't change what happened. I know what happened. I was there." "I know," he said, "but other people should know too." Why? She said, and it wasn't combative, just honest. Who does it help? The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Behind him, the bar was unnaturally still. The card game had stopped. The couple at the end of the counter were no longer pretending to be absorbed in each other. Even the television felt like background noise. It helps the next person, he said finally. The next nurse, the next medic, the next person who does something extraordinary and then spends years thinking it disappeared into a file somewhere. She considered that. She picked up the rag again. Old habit. You want a drink? She said. He almost laughed. Bourbon, if you have it. We have 3 kinds. Surprise me. She poured. She slid the glass across the bar. He caught it without looking down. And that was the moment Mason Vance stood up. She saw him coming in her peripheral vision. He moved with the practiced ease of someone who believed his presence solved problems, crossing the few feet between his table and the bar with his hands loose at his sides, his expression recalibrated from mockery to something he probably thought looked like confidence. He stopped at the bar, 2 stools down from the Admiral. He looked at the mark on the Admiral's arm. He looked at Olivia's arm. He looked at the Admiral. Sir, he said. Formal, uncertain. I don't mean to interrupt. Then don't, the Admiral said without turning. A beat. Vance absorbed this. Yes, sir. He didn't move. He stood there for a moment, visibly recalculating, and then he went back to his table. He sat down. He said nothing to his group. Olivia watched him go. She turned back to the Admiral. He was watching her with an expression that had grown more complicated. How long were they bothering you? He said. A couple hours, she said. It wasn't... She stopped. It was fine. It wasn't fine. No, she admitted. But I've dealt with worse. In Kurava province, he said. Other places too, she said. He looked at her for a long moment, then he said quietly, You want to know the detail that still gets me? After everything that happened, after everything that mission cost, he paused. Command had the after-action records sealed so fast that the people who were supposed to receive commendations never got called. The paperwork just stopped. And the people who did the work went home with nothing, or didn't go home at all. Olivia said nothing. She knew this part. She'd known it the whole time. I fought to fix it, the Admiral said. For 6 years I fought it. I know, she said. He looked at her. How do you know? She picked up the bourbon glass and wiped down the ring it had left on the bar. Because you're here, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, The formal ceremony is scheduled for the 20th. We'd like you to be there. All 4 of you, if we can get you in the same room. I'll think about it. That's what the second one told me too, he said. She showed up anyway. Olivia almost smiled. Didn't quite. Behind the Admiral, she could see Vance's table. The 5 of them sitting with an energy that had completely changed from what it had been an hour ago. The easy confidence had compressed into something quieter and more uncomfortable. Kowalski was looking at the bar with an expression she recognized, the particular look of someone reassessing a situation and not loving what they were finding. Vance was staring at his glass. She had seen that look on people before, the moment when certainty collided with information it couldn't process. She didn't take satisfaction in it, or she tried not to. The truth was, there was a small, human, not particularly admirable part of her that felt something sharp and gratifying about the silence at that table. She'd worked hard to become a person who didn't need that. She wasn't there yet. She turned back to the Admiral. I need to close up in an hour, she said. I'll be gone in 30 minutes, he said. I have a car outside. He picked up his glass again. I just needed to see you were real. I'm real, she said. Yeah. He looked at the mark on her arm one more time. You are. She refilled his bourbon without being asked. He didn't argue. Across the bar, one of the card players was watching the Admiral's uniform with the particular attention of a man who'd worn one of his own once. The couple at the end of the counter had given up on their conversation entirely and were just sitting there, openly listening, though they were too far away to catch most of what was being said. And at the corner table, Mason Vance pulled out his phone. Not to look at it, she realized, but to have something in his hands. He set it face down on the table, picked it up, set it down again. Olivia watched this without watching it. She'd spent 6 years building a life around exactly this kind of night. The ordinary friction, the small humiliations that happened when you worked with the public, the drunks and the arrogant, and the ones who thought service work made you invisible. She told herself it was uncomplicated. She told herself she'd chosen it because it was simple, and she needed simple. But standing here now with the Admiral's glass in front of her, and the recognition marker still echoing somewhere in her chest, she was aware that simple had been a thing she'd reached for because the alternative, acknowledging what she carried, what she'd survived, what she'd lost, was the kind of thing that didn't fit in a small bar in Ravenport, Colorado. The Admiral hadn't come here to disrupt her life. He'd come here to give her back a piece of it. She wasn't sure those were different things. She was picking up a rag to wipe down the counter when one of the men in Vance's group made a strangled sound that, not a laugh, not a cough, and then said, very quietly, "Mason." She looked up. The man with the shaved head, Kowalski, was on his feet. His face had gone an ugly color, somewhere between gray and green. His hand was at his throat. She moved before she thought about it. The rag hit the bar. She was around the counter in 2 steps. The narrow pass-through door at the end of the bar. She went through it without breaking stride, the latch giving way under her palm. She reached Kowalski in the time it took Vance to realize something was wrong and push back from his chair. She assessed in the first second, conscious, upright but barely, one hand at throat, the other hand braced on the table. Cyanotic tinge beginning at the lips. Eye contact. He could still make it, barely. "Look at me," she said. "Can you speak?" He shook his head. "Can you breathe?" The smallest nod. Partial airway. "Allergic reaction," she said, already scanning his wrists for a medical bracelet. "Or something stuck?" He pointed at his throat, then at the food basket in front of him, then at his wrist. Medical bracelet. She got to it, read it. Behind her, Vance said, "What's happening? Should I call 911, she said. "Already. Tell them anaphylaxis, conscious, partial airway obstruction. Male, mid-20s, military base location. Give them this address." She didn't look at him. She had already moved to the position she needed. Kowalski in front of her, his airway her entire world. "Do it now!" She heard him on the phone. She heard the bar behind her go absolutely silent, and she worked. Her hands moved with a precision that had nothing to do with 2 years of bartending and everything to do with something older. A specific practiced calm that settled in when other people's panic was trying to fill the room. She talked Kowalski through it, low and even, one thing at a time. Kept him upright, monitored the airway. Called out information to Vance on the phone so the dispatcher had what they needed. When she found the epinephrine auto-injector on Kowalski's belt, he was carrying one, thank God, had the presence of mind to get to it himself before she'd reached him. She walked him through deploying it rather than doing it herself, watching his face, watching his breathing, watching the second hand move on the clock above the bar. The Admiral had moved to the end of the bar. He was standing very still, watching. 60 seconds after the EpiPen deployed, Kowalski's color began to shift. His shoulders dropped 2 inches. He drew a longer breath. "There," she said. "Stay with me. Slow." "Yeah," he said, ragged. First word he'd managed. "You've been here before," she said. "I can tell. You know what this is." "Shellfish," he said, barely above a whisper. Thought they'd fried it separate. We'll go over what happened later," she said. "Right now I need you sitting down." He sat. She knelt in front of him so she could maintain eye contact without him having to hold his head up. She counted his breathing. She asked him 3 questions in quick succession. What day? What month? What color is my shirt? And he answered all 3 correctly. "Good," she said. "EMS is coming. You're not going to need the ER for long if your response time holds. Secondary reaction window is up to 4 hours, so they'll keep you for observation, but you're going to be okay." She said it with enough certainty that he believed it. Not because she was performing certainty, because she had the data, and the data said he was going to be okay. His breathing continued to stabilize. She stayed exactly where she was. Behind her, the bar was still silent. She was aware of it, the weight of all those people watching something they hadn't expected to see tonight. She was aware of Vance, who had ended the call and was standing 2 feet away with his hands at his sides, and his face doing something complicated and unfamiliar. She was aware of the Admiral, still at the bar, watching her with an expression she recognized from the field, from the moments when people who had seen serious things saw those same skills appear in a civilian context and had to do a rapid mental readjustment about where they were and what was in front of them. She stayed with Kowalski. She monitored his pulse. She talked to him in the low, even voice she'd learned in conditions where keeping someone calm was not optional. She was so focused on his breathing that she almost didn't notice when the front door of the Anchor and Nail opened again. But she heard it. And she heard the boots. Not one set, several, moving with the particular rhythm of people who were not confused about where they were going or why. She didn't look up, not yet. The boots stopped. A voice spoke. Not to Kowalski, not to the bar, to her. Staff Sergeant Olivia Hart? She checked Kowalski's pulse one more time, steady, strong enough. Then she looked up. 3 men in uniform stood inside the door. Not medical. She registered that immediately. Military police or something adjacent. Behind them, through the still open door, she could see vehicles in the parking lot. Dark. Official. The man who'd spoken was holding a folder. Something in the air changed. Not just in the bar, but specifically in the space around her. Some fundamental shift in what this night was. What it had been heading toward since the moment those boots hit the pavement outside. She looked at the Admiral. He was on his feet. He was not surprised. She looked back at the man with the folder. "Who are you?" she said. Her voice came out exactly the way she needed it to, even unhurried, carrying no fear it couldn't afford to carry. The man opened the folder. He held it so she could read it from where she was kneeling. She read it. She read it again. The room around her seemed to do something, not quite tilt, but shift. The kind of shift that happened when something you had been certain was over turned out not to be. "We need you to come with us," the man said. She didn't move right away. That was the first thing everyone in the bar registered. That she didn't scramble to her feet, didn't look alarmed, didn't do any of the things a person does when authority walks through a door and says their name. She just knelt there for another 2 seconds, her fingers still at Kowalski's wrist, finishing what she was doing before she let herself deal with anything else. Then she stood up. "EMS is still 4 minutes out," she said, not to the man with the folder, but to Vance. "He needs to stay sitting. Keep talking to him. Doesn't matter what about. Just keep him engaged. If his breathing changes, you call out immediately." Vance, who 20 minutes ago had been doing his best impression of a man without a care in the world, said, "Yes, ma'am," quietly, without irony. She turned to face the men at the door. There were 3 of them, and now that she was standing, she could read them more clearly. The one with the folder was in his 40s, civilian clothes but military posture, the kind of combination that meant investigator rather than field. The 2 behind him were younger and were definitely not here to ask nicely about anything. They weren't threatening, not yet, but they carried themselves with the specific stillness of people who expected compliance. "Olivia Hart," the man said again, "we have a request from the Office of Defense Intelligence. We need you to come with us tonight." The Admiral had moved from the bar to the open floor, positioning himself not between her and the men, but slightly to the side. Close enough to be in the conversation, far enough to make clear he wasn't intervening yet. His face was controlled, but she caught something in it. Not surprise. More like, "This is happening faster than I expected," which told her something. "Defense Intelligence," she said. "Not JAG, not CID." "That's correct." "So this isn't about a legal matter?" "It's not, no." "Then you have a request," she said. "Not an order." The man with the folder paused, a tiny pause, but she caught it. "We'd prefer voluntary cooperation. I'd prefer you tell me what this is about before I go anywhere." Behind her, she heard Kowalski pull in a slow breath, steadier than before. She tracked it with the part of her brain that never fully stopped doing that, even while the rest of her was running threat assessment on the men at the door. The lead investigator, she'd mentally filed him as Folder because she didn't have a name yet, looked briefly at the Admiral. The Admiral gave a small nod. Folder said, "We can discuss it in the vehicle. There are details that aren't appropriate for—" He glanced at the room full of frozen civilians. This setting. Then you can wait outside until EMS clears my patient, she said, and then I'll listen to what you have to say, but I'm not going anywhere blind. She heard one of the men behind Folder shift his weight. She didn't look at them. Folder held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he closed the folder. We'll be outside, he said. He turned and walked back through the door. After a beat, the other two followed. The door swung shut behind them, and the bar exhaled. The Admiral came to stand beside her, low enough that it was between the two of them. I didn't know they were coming tonight, he said. But you knew they were coming. A beat. I knew they'd been looking for you. And you came first. I came first, he said. She absorbed this. It wasn't a betrayal. She could see that. But it also wasn't uncomplicated. He'd come here ahead of them, which meant he'd wanted her to have context before the folder arrived. That was either loyalty or management, and she wasn't sure yet which. What do they want? She said. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the bar's single front window, she could see the shape of the vehicles in the lot. Dark SUVs, engines running. There's a situation, he said, connected to Kurava province. I don't know the full scope of it, and I'm telling you that honestly. Connected how? One of the 5, he said. The one who went off-grid. Something in her chest went tight. She kept her face still. He's been found? She said. Not exactly, the Admiral said. She waited. Olivia. He said her name carefully, like it had weight. I think you should hear it from them. Not because I'm keeping things from you. I genuinely don't have the full picture. But what I do know is that whatever they're asking, it matters. And they came to you specifically. Sirens outside, getting closer. She turned and went back to Kowalski without answering. EMS arrived 2 minutes later. 2 paramedics who moved through the bar with the practiced efficiency of people who'd been called into the Anchor and Nail before. She gave them the handoff cleanly. Timeline, EpiPen deployment, current vitals, secondary reaction risk window, allergy noted on the bracelet. The lead paramedic, a woman in her 30s named Santos, nodded along without interrupting and asked exactly 2 follow-up questions, both good ones. You a nurse? Santos said. Among other things, Olivia said. She stepped back. Let them work. Went to the bar and untied her apron and told the owner, a heavy-set man named Greer, who had materialized from the back office during the commotion and had been standing in the hallway looking alarmed, that she was stepping out. For how long? Greer said. I don't know, she said. He opened his mouth, closed it. He'd seen the men in the parking lot through the window, seen the Admiral, seen what she'd done with Kowalski, and he was doing the rapid recalibration that people did when they realized they didn't actually know who they'd been employing. Take whatever time you need, he said. She put on her jacket. She picked up the room key from under the bar. She kept it there out of habit, even though she'd walked to work tonight. Then she stopped. She turned around. Vance was standing by the paramedics, watching them work on Kowalski, his hands in his pockets. When he heard her move, he looked up. Their eyes met across the bar. He looked for the first time tonight genuinely unsure of himself, not performing uncertainty, actually unsure. Like a person standing in a room and realizing all the measurements were wrong. She held his gaze for a moment, then she walked out. The cold hit her immediately. November in Ravenport was not gentle, dry and sharp, the kind of air that woke you up whether you wanted it to or not. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment and let it clear her head. Then she walked toward the nearest SUV. Folder was waiting outside the vehicle. He'd put the folder away. Without it, he looked slightly less official and slightly more tired. Thank you for coming out, he said. I haven't agreed to anything yet, she said. What's your name? Renner? Daniel Renner. Who do you work for exactly? Office of Defense Intelligence, Classified Operations Review. We handle historical missions that require re-examination. Historical, she said. Kurava province was 6 years ago, he said. That qualifies. She looked at the vehicles. 2 SUVs, both running. One of the 2 men from inside was behind the wheel of the second. The other had disappeared somewhere, which she noted and filed. What happened to the 5th member of our unit? She said. Renner looked at her for a long moment. He made a decision. His name was, according to our records, Specialist Dale Mercer, he said. He surfaced 14 months ago under a different identity in a different country. We believe he's been living under the alias since approximately 2019. Mercer. She hadn't said that name in years, hadn't let herself think it. Is he alive? She said. He's alive, Renner said, but there's a complication. There always is. He's been talking, Renner said, to people he shouldn't have been talking to. About Kurava province, specifically about what the mission was actually for. Not the cover story, the real objective. She went very still. And the people he told, she said, are not people we'd have chosen, Renner said. No. She looked at the dark parking lot beyond the SUVs. A few cars she recognized from regulars. A pickup with a cracked taillight. The tire depot sign across the road, half its letters burned out. What does any of this have to do with me? She said. You were the unit's medical officer, he said. You were present for every phase of the operation. You're the only one of the 4 who we've located who had visibility into all 4 extraction points. And you think I have something in my memory that helps you with whatever mess Mercer made. We think you have something in your memory that helps us understand what he gave them, Renner said, and more importantly, what he might still have. She said nothing for a moment. The cold settled around her shoulders. The Admiral, she said, he's been pushing to get the mission record declassified. Commendations, formal recognition. That process. Does this complicate it? Renner's expression shifted in a way she didn't like. That's a conversation for a different level than mine. Which meant yes. Which meant that 6 years of nothing, followed by one night of someone finally showing up to say the record would be corrected, had immediately run headfirst into a complication that could bury it again. She breathed out through her nose. Where are you taking me? She said. Buckhorn Federal Installation. It's 40 minutes from here. She knew Buckhorn by reputation. Not a combat base. A facilities installation, the kind that handled sensitive interviews and debriefs and things that needed to happen quietly. Am I being detained? No, he said. Then I need 30 minutes. I need to check that my patient is stable and brief the bar owner on closing procedures and change my shirt. She paused. Unless you have a problem with any of that. Renner looked at her for a moment. 30 minutes, he said. She went back inside. The EMS team was packaging Kowalski for transport when she re-entered. He was sitting up, alert, some color back in his face. The severity was past, though his body would be dealing with the aftershocks for hours. She checked in with Santos, got the update, signed off on the handoff information. Then she crouched down next to the gurney. Kowalski looked at her. His voice was still rough. You didn't have to stay. Yes, I did, she said. You doing okay? Better than 20 minutes ago. A beat. I've had the allergy since I was 12. I know how fast it can go. Usually I'm more careful. Cross-contamination, she said. It happens. You had your EpiPen. You got it out in time. You did the right things. He nodded. Then quietly, the tattoo. On your arm. She waited. I wasn't the one saying things, he said. But I laughed. I want you to know I know that. She looked at him. She thought about several different responses. She settled on the one that was most honest. I know, she said. Get some rest. She stood up and went to find the Admiral, who was still in the bar, sitting at a stool with his bourbon barely touched. He looked up when she approached. Buckhorn, she said. He nodded once. Do you want me to come? Can you? I have standing, he said. It's not my investigation, but I can be present as a... He paused. As someone with direct operational history. Then come, she said. I'd rather have you there than not. She went to the back to change her shirt. She kept a spare in her locker, one of several practicalities she'd built into her routine without letting herself examine why. The locker room was a converted storage closet, barely big enough for 2 people, with a single fluorescent bulb that flickered at startup. She pulled the spare shirt on and stood for a moment looking at herself in the mirror that someone had duct taped to the inside of the locker door. She looked exactly like she always did, which was somehow strange. She'd expected to look different, changed, like the night had done something visible to her, but the same face looked back. Same braid, same tired eyes, same mark on the arm that caught the light when she moved. She'd spent 6 years telling herself she was fine with ordinary. Some days she'd even believed it. She closed the locker. On her way out, she passed Vance. He was sitting at the bar now, alone. The rest of his group had filtered out while EMS worked, or were waiting in the parking lot, she wasn't sure. He was turned on the stool so he could face the door, but he wasn't watching the door. He was looking at the counter. He heard her footsteps and looked up. "Is Kowalski going to be okay?" he said. "He'll be fine," she said. "They'll keep him overnight." Vance nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more and didn't know how to start. She recognized that particular paralysis, the specific difficulty of a person who's been wrong in a way they can't explain away, trying to find the right entry point for accountability without knowing where the door is. "I don't," he started. "You don't have to say it tonight," she said. "I know, but Vance." She stopped walking. She turned to face him. "I've been underestimated by people with far more experience than you and far more reason to know better. It's not a new thing. It won't be the last time it happens." She paused. "But you saw something tonight that most people don't get to see. What you do with it is up to you." She didn't wait for him to respond. She walked out. The Admiral was waiting by the door with his jacket back on, stars and all. She fell into step beside him and they walked out together into the cold. In the parking lot, Renner was waiting by the lead SUV. He looked at the Admiral, clearly recalculating the evening's passenger list. "Admiral Cole," Renner said. "Careful." "I'm coming as an observer," the Admiral said. "You can note that however you like." Renner nodded once and opened the rear door without further argument. They drove in silence for most of the first 20 minutes. Ravenport fell away behind them, the strip of commercial blocks, the overpass, the flat dark of the high plains opening up on either side. The SUV's interior was warm and slightly too quiet, the kind of quiet that accumulated instead of settling. She watched the landscape through the window and let herself think about Mercer. Dale Mercer had been 24 in March of 2018, the youngest member of their unit by 3 years, which had meant almost nothing in the field. He'd been good, genuinely good, with the particular competence of someone trained well and paid attention. He'd had a sister in Savannah and a habit of humming half-remembered songs when he was stressed, and he'd been the one who'd come up with the recognition phrase about the coffee because he'd been the one making the joke about how bad the rations were when they needed to create the marker. She hadn't known he'd gone off-grid until this moment. She hadn't looked for any of them. It had been a deliberate choice, made early, maintained without exception. She decided that looking back was the thing most likely to undo whatever she was building, so she hadn't looked. She thought about Mercer talking, about what he might have said, and to whom, and why. It didn't read like betrayal to her. It read like a person who'd carried something too long and put it down wrong. She'd been close to that herself in the first 2 years. She'd had nights when the silence of not being able to tell the truth about what she'd done felt less like discretion and more like being buried alive. Maybe Mercer had found himself in a different room than she had, a room without a bar to run and patients to treat and the small, grinding anchor of ordinary work. She didn't know. She'd never know, unless she asked him. The thought that she might be about to get that opportunity settled in her chest with a strange weight. Buckhorn Federal Installation appeared ahead as a series of lights against the flat dark. Not a dramatic facility, not the kind of place movies imagined when they imagined intelligence operations. Just a low complex of prefab structures and gravel access roads surrounded by chain link and lit badly. The gate guard waved them through without stopping the vehicle. Renner spoke for the first time since they'd left Ravenport. "We'll set you up in a secure interview room. There are refreshments, bathrooms down the hall. You're here voluntarily, and you can end the interview whenever you want." "I know my rights," she said. "I know you do," he said. "I'm telling you anyway because it's protocol, and because I'd rather we start this on a cooperative footing." "What's the other footing?" the Admiral said from the seat beside her. Renner didn't answer. He opened the door as the vehicle came to a stop. The interview room was exactly what she'd expected. A table, 4 chairs, a water pitcher, a digital recorder already on the table with its red light off. A one-way glass panel on the left wall that wasn't trying to hide itself. She sat with the Admiral on her side of the table and Renner on the other. and a second person she hadn't met yet. A woman in her mid-40s, short hair, no jacket, the look of someone who'd been here for hours before they arrived. The woman didn't introduce herself. She opened a folder, a different one from Renner's, and placed a photograph on the table. Olivia looked at it. It was Mercer. Older, obviously. Different hair, a beard he hadn't had before, and the particular look of someone who'd been working at not being recognized for years. But the eyes were right. The angle of the jaw was right. This was taken 11 months ago in Dubrovnik, the woman said, under the name David Halverson. He'd changed his nationality documentation, the Admiral said. Norwegian passport, the woman said. Well constructed. He'd had it for at least 4 years. Olivia said nothing. She looked at Mercer's face in the photograph and thought about the fact that he'd been alive this whole time, in a city on the Adriatic coast, with a name that wasn't his. What was he saying? She said. About Kurava province. Specifically. The woman looked at Renner. Renner gave a small nod. He'd told 3 people, the woman said. Over approximately 8 months. The first was a journalist based in Vienna. The second was a retired military contractor with known ties to 2 foreign intelligence services. The third... She paused. The third was a woman we haven't fully identified yet. We believe she was the handler. We believe the first 2 were warm-up. Olivia kept her face still. He told a handler, she said. We believe so. What did he tell them? He described the mission objectives in Kurava province. The real ones. The woman looked at her steadily. He described the 4 extraction points and what was retrieved from each. He described the personnel involved, including the medical officer. A pause. Including you. By role, if not by name. We don't believe he gave names, the Admiral said carefully. How do you know what he told them? The Vienna journalist came forward, Renner said. Got nervous when the contractor turned up dead. Natural causes, according to the official report, but the timing... He didn't finish the sentence. Olivia heard the shape of it anyway. Mercer had started talking. Someone had started managing what he'd said. The contractor who'd heard too much was no longer able to repeat it. She felt cold, and it had nothing to do with the November temperature outside. Why me? She said. Out of the 4 who are left. Why am I the one you drove to tonight? The woman placed a second photograph on the table. This one she didn't recognize immediately. A building, a corridor. A still from security footage, grainy and time-stamped. This was taken 8 days ago, the woman said, at the VA clinic in Glenwood, where one of your colleagues referred Renner to you. She looked at the image. A figure in the corridor. Angle and distance made it hard to read, but the build was right. The way the person moved was right. She looked up. Mercer, she said. We believe so, Renner said. He was looking for me. He was looking for someone, the woman said. You may be right that it was you specifically. The clinic records were accessed. An internal inquiry flagged it 3 days ago, which is how we connected it. The room went quiet. Olivia looked at the photograph for another moment. Then she looked at the Admiral. He was watching her with an expression she recognized from the field. The particular look of someone sitting with information they can't change and trying to figure out what comes next. He's not running from you, she said to Renner. If he's in Glenwood, he's not running. No, Renner said. We don't think he is. He's coming to me. That's our assessment. She sat back. The water pitcher was in front of her. She poured a glass, not because she was thirsty, but because the action of doing it bought her 3 seconds to think. Mercer. Coming to find her. Not running, moving toward something. The contractor dead. A handler, unidentified. A journalist who'd gotten scared and come forward. And Mercer, who'd hummed half-forgotten songs under artillery fire, walking into a VA clinic in Glenwood, Colorado, looking for a trail that would lead him to her door. She set the glass down. I want to know, she said, exactly what was at those 4 extraction points. The full record, not the cover story. Renner said, that's classified above my clearance, she said. I was there. I carried people out of 2 of those 4 points. Whatever you think I don't know, I was present for. A silence. The woman looked at Renner again. Something passed between them. "There's a reason the record was sealed," Renner said carefully. "I know there is," Olivia said. "I've known for 6 years. And now there's a man with a dead contractor in his wake who is on his way to find me, and you want my cooperation. And I am sitting here voluntarily telling you I will cooperate." She stopped, breathed. "But I am not going into this blind, not again." The fluorescent lights above the table buzzed faintly. The recorder's red light was still off. The woman reached into the folder. She pulled out a third document. She did not put it on the table. She held it, looking at Olivia over the top of it. "If we read you in fully," she said, "there's no walking it back. The classification level changes what you can discuss, and with whom, permanently." "I understand," Olivia said. "You'd be involved in an active intelligence matter." "I already am," Olivia said, "whether or not you read me in." The woman held the document for another few seconds. Then she placed it on the table and turned it so Olivia could read it. Olivia read the first paragraph, then the second. By the third, she understood why the record had been sealed. By the fifth, she understood why Mercer had started talking. And by the time she reached the bottom of the page, she understood something else. Something nobody in this room had told her yet. Something that lived in the space between what the document said and what it deliberately didn't say. She looked up. "Where's the fifth extraction point?" she said. The woman's expression didn't change. Renner looked at the table. "There were 4 extraction points," he said. "The document lists 4, Olivia said. "I was at 4. She looked at him steadily. "I'm asking about the 5th. The silence that followed was not the silence of people who didn't know what she was talking about. It was the silence of people who had hoped she wouldn't ask. The silence stretched long enough to become its own answer. Renner was looking at the table. The woman, Olivia had decided to call her Slate, because she had that quality, flat and hard and revealing nothing, was looking at Olivia with the particular stillness of someone running calculations behind their eyes. The Admiral had gone very quiet beside her. She noted that too. "Admiral Cole," she said without looking at him, "did you know about a 5th extraction point?" A pause. "I knew there were aspects of the mission record I wasn't cleared for." "That's not what I asked." Another pause. Longer. "I had heard, informally, that the official account of Kurava province was incomplete." She turned her head and looked at him directly. He held her gaze, and to his credit, he didn't dress it up further. He'd known something. He hadn't told her. She could be angry about that, or she could table it and deal with what was in front of her, which was a document on a table and 2 intelligence officers waiting to see what she did next. She looked back at Slate. "The 5th point," she said. "Tell me." Slate looked at Renner. Renner picked up the water pitcher, which was the most pointless thing he'd done all evening, then put it down again. "There was a location," Slate said, "approximately 9 kilometers northeast of your 4th extraction point. It wasn't on the operational brief your unit received because the decision to include it was made at command level approximately 4 hours before the mission launched. There wasn't time, or the decision was made that there wasn't need, to update the field team." "What was there?" Olivia said. "A secondary cache," Slate said. "Intelligence assets. Documents, hard drives, and 1 individual, a source who'd been embedded in the region for approximately 14 months. The primary team was supposed to reach that location after your unit completed the medical extractions." "Was supposed to," Olivia said. "The primary team didn't make it," Slate said. Olivia sat with that for a moment. 72 hours in Kurava province, and she'd known something had gone wrong with the broader operation. She'd heard it in the radio traffic, in the silences where check-ins should have been, in the way command's responses had gotten tighter and more clipped as the hours went on. She'd assumed it was casualties. She'd focused on her own objectives and not asked questions she didn't need answers to, because in the field, questions you didn't need answers to were a resource drain. The source, she said, the individual at the 5th point, was not extracted, Slate said. Was he alive when the mission ended? Slate looked at the folder in front of her. Unknown. The last confirmed contact with the 5th location was approximately 31 hours into your unit's operational window. After that, radio silence. Olivia thought about what she'd been doing at 31 hours in. She'd been in an improvised surgical bay in a collapsed structure, working on a man who'd taken shrapnel through his lower abdomen, with 200 milliliters of saline left and no power for the autoclave. She'd been so deep in that particular problem that the rest of the mission had narrowed to a single point of focus. "What does this have to do with Mercer?" she said. "Mercer," Renner said carefully, "is the one who told us the fifth point existed." She looked at him. "He's the one who went back," Renner said. The room recalibrated itself around that sentence. She heard the Admiral draw a slow breath. "Mercer went back to the fifth location," she said. "After the official mission window closed," Renner said. "We believe he went back on his own, off-book. We don't know exactly what he found there, but we know he came out carrying something, because 2 weeks after Karava province, he made a request through back channels for a secure document transfer that was denied. 6 months after that, he was off the grid." She thought about 24-year-old Dale Mercer. She thought about what kind of person goes back to a location 9 kilometers outside the operational perimeter after 72 hours on his own. A person who'd seen something that he couldn't leave behind. The things he told the journalist, she said. The contractor. He wasn't leaking the mission. He was trying to expose the fifth location. Slate said nothing. He was trying to get someone to pay attention to the fact that a source was abandoned, Olivia said. That a person was left there. Renner said, "We don't know his motivations with certainty." "I do," she said. She said it without heat. She said it because it was true, and because she'd known Mercer, and because the shape of what she was hearing fit the shape of the man she'd worked beside in a field hospital with the walls coming down. "Why now?" the Admiral said. It was the first thing he'd said in several minutes, and she could hear the effort in keeping his voice level. 6 years later, why is this surfacing now? Slate and Renner exchanged a look that lasted slightly too long. "The contractor who died," Olivia said. "He wasn't just a man who'd heard a story, he was connected to the region, to Karava province specifically," Slate said. "He had operational history in that theater, yes. And you think the people he was connected to, the foreign intelligence services, you think they now know what was at the fifth location?" "We think," Renner said, picking his words carefully, "that there is a possibility the information Mercer disclosed has created an active risk for the mission record, for the people involved, and for the source, in the event the source is still alive," Olivia said. "In the event," Renner said. She looked at the photograph of Mercer. Dubrovnik, 11 months ago. A beard and a Norwegian passport and eyes that were still the same. "You want me to talk to him," she said. "When he comes?" "We want to be present when contact is made," Renner said. "And yes, we believe he'll respond better to you than to an official approach. The official approaches haven't worked." "How many have you made?" 3, Renner said. He walked away from all of them. She understood that. She understood it completely. "You're not just asking me to talk to him," she said. "You're asking me to bring him in." "We're asking you to facilitate a conversation," Slate said, "in a controlled setting, with 2 intelligence officers and a federal installation in the background." "Yes," Slate said without apology. Olivia looked at the document still on the table in front of her. The fifth extraction point, 9 kilometers northeast, a source who might or might not have survived, and a 24-year-old specialist who'd gone back alone because he couldn't leave it alone. "I need something from you first," she said. Renner leaned back slightly. "What?" "The Admiral has been pursuing formal recognition for the Karava province personnel for 3 years," she said. That process was moving. "Tonight you implied it was complicated by what Mercer disclosed." "It's a more sensitive situation now. I want it in writing," she said. "That the recognition process isn't killed because of this. That whatever Mercer disclosed, whatever investigation you're running, the commendations for the 4 surviving members of our unit are not collateral damage." Renner looked at Slate. Slate said, "We can't make guarantees about classified proceedings." "Then we're done tonight," Olivia said. She pushed back her chair. "Miss Hart, I came here voluntarily," she said. "You told me that at the door. I've listened to everything you've said. I've looked at your documents. I've given you more than you had any reason to expect at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. She stood. What I haven't given you is cooperation, because you haven't given me anything worth cooperating for. The room was quiet. She waited. Slate said, "Sit down." "I'm not under orders," Olivia said. "No," Slate said. "But you're a person who went back to Karava province in your head every day for 6 years, whether or not you admitted it. And you know that if Mercer is coming to find you, he is carrying something that needs to land somewhere safe." She paused. "I'm asking you to sit down." It was the most human thing Slate had said all evening. Olivia heard it for what it was, not a tactic, not exactly. More like one person speaking plainly to another because the alternative was watching everything unravel. She sat down. "I'll make a call," Slate said. "Tonight, before you leave this facility. I will personally speak to the recognition process coordinator, and I will communicate that the review status of Karava province personnel is not to be affected by this investigation." She looked at Olivia steadily. "That's what I can do. I won't put it in writing tonight because the paperwork doesn't work that fast, and anything I produce in the next 4 hours would be legally worthless anyway. But I'll make the call." Olivia looked at her for a moment. She was assessing the truthfulness of someone she'd known for less than 2 hours in a facility she'd never been to, with the stakes being something she cared about more than she'd admitted even to herself. "Admiral Cole will be on the call," she said. Slate glanced at the Admiral. He looked back at her with the particular patience of someone who had learned that patience was the only tool that reliably worked. "Fine," Slate said. "Okay," Olivia said. Tell me what you need." What they needed was, in theory, straightforward. Mercer was coming to her. The clinic access, the geographic trail, the fact that he'd gotten close enough to be caught on security footage, all of it suggested someone who was navigating toward a specific destination without quite being ready to arrive. They wanted Olivia available. They wanted her to maintain her normal routine, clinic shifts, bar work, the Ravenport life she'd built. And when Mercer made contact, she was to signal Renner's team, who would be in position at a distance, before engaging. She did not like the phrase, "in position at a distance." "Define distance," she said. "Close enough to respond," Renner said. "Far enough that he doesn't spook." If he's coming to me specifically," she said, "it's because he needs something from me that he doesn't think he can get anywhere official. The moment he senses any federal presence, you lose him." "We're aware of that risk," Renner said. "Then why are you running it?" "Because we don't have a better option," Renner said. "We've tried reaching him directly. You're what we have." The honesty of that was not comfortable, but it was at least real. "If he talks to me," she said, "and if he tells me things about the 5th location, about what he found there, I'm not reporting it to you verbatim, not in real time. I'm not wearing a wire." "We'd prefer—" "I know what you'd prefer," she said. "I'm telling you what I'll do. I'll make contact. I'll talk to him. And if he's willing to come in and talk to you, I will personally walk him through the door. But I'm not going to do it with a transmitter under my shirt, because if he finds it, you get nothing, and he disappears for good." Renner looked like he wanted to argue. Slate put a hand flat on the table, which seemed to be their signal for "let it go." "Agreed," Slate said. "No wire, but you carry a phone. If there's a safety concern, for you or for him, you use it." "That I'll agree to," Olivia said. They spent another 40 minutes going over the operational details, which was a generous word for what was essentially, go home, act normal, don't tell anyone, call this number when it happens. She was given a contact card with a number that wasn't Renner's name and wasn't tied to anything she could verify. She memorized it and left the card on the table. The Admiral made his call to the recognition coordinator while she waited in the corridor. A brief, even conversation that she heard only in fragments through the closed door, but she heard enough. His voice had that particular quality it got when he was asking for something he was owed rather than requesting a favor. When he came out, he nodded at her. Done. They drove back to Ravenport in the same vehicles, arriving at 1:47 a.m. The Anchor and Nails parking lot was empty. The sign was dark. She'd missed closing entirely, which meant Greer had handled it himself, which he was perfectly capable of doing and which she felt vaguely guilty about regardless. The Admiral walked her to the sidewalk. The SUVs idled at the curb. "You're angry with me," he said. "A little," she said. "Not a lot. I should have told you there were gaps in what I knew about the mission record." "Yes," she said. "But you came here first, before them." She paused. "That matters." He looked at her for a moment. He looked tired. Not just the hour, but the accumulated weight of 3 years of fighting a bureaucratic process while also carrying whatever he knew or suspected about the fifth location. "The source," she said. "The person left at the fifth point. Do you know who it was?" He was quiet for a moment. "I have a name," he said. "I'm not certain it's accurate." "Tell me." He told her. She stood with it for a moment. The cold was sharp and real around her. Somewhere down the block, a traffic light cycled through its sequence to an empty intersection. "If that's right," she said, "then Mercer didn't just go back for a principal." "No," the Admiral said. "He didn't." She exhaled. Her breath hung in the air for a second and then dissolved. "Get some sleep," she said. "I'll call you when it happens." She walked home. 22 minutes through streets that were quiet in the specific way of small towns at 2 in the morning. Not abandoned, just resting, the buildings holding their shapes patiently in the dark. She let herself think about nothing for most of it. It was a skill she'd developed deliberately, the ability to put things in a compartment and close the door, not because she was suppressing them, but because there was nothing productive in turning them over between point A and point B. She let herself into her apartment, a second-floor unit above a laundromat, minimal in the way of someone who either hadn't accumulated things or had gotten rid of them. A couch. A kitchen with mostly clean dishes, a bedroom with a mattress on a frame, and a bedside table with a glass of water. She refilled every night out of a habit she'd had since she was a child. She sat on the edge of the bed. She held the name the Admiral had given her, turned it over once, and put it back in the compartment. She slept for 4 hours. Her alarm went off at 6, and she turned it off and lay there for a moment looking at the ceiling, which was the thing she did every morning. Took 30 seconds to account for where she was and what day it was and what needed doing. Old habit, deployed habit. Most mornings it took less than 10 seconds, and then she got up. This morning it took the full 30. She showered, she made coffee, real coffee, not the bar brand, and stood at the kitchen window while it brewed, watching the street below. A delivery truck, a woman walking a dog, a teenager on a bike who was clearly not supposed to be out at 6 a.m. but was anyway. The day was normal. That was what she was supposed to maintain. Normal. She went to the clinic. The Orenda Valley Community Clinic was on the other side of Ravenport from the Anchor and Nail, a converted 2-story building that had been a dental office in a previous life and still had a faintly antiseptic smell in the waiting room that no amount of repainting had resolved. She did 2 shifts a week, Tuesday and Saturday, handling mostly walk-ins and follow-ups, wound care, medication management, the occasional acute presentation that needed triaging before the nearest hospital 40 minutes away. It was not complex work by any external measure, and it was exactly what she needed it to be. She had 3 patients before 9 o'clock, a construction worker with an infected laceration on his forearm that needed repackaging, an elderly woman with a blood pressure reading that required an immediate call to her cardiologist, a teenage boy whose mother had brought him in for a persistent cough that turned out, on assessment, to be anxiety presenting somatically, which required a different conversation than the one his mother had come prepared for. She handled all 3. Between patients, she was aware, not constantly but in the background, of the possibility that someone might walk through the door. She didn't let it show. She moved through the morning the way she moved through every shift, attentive, unhurried, the kind of steady that people mistook for simple. The 4th patient of the morning arrived at 10:23. She knew before the nurse called her back. She heard the name, the alias, Halverson, and her hand stopped for just a fraction of a second before she finished writing the notation she was writing, capped the pen, and stood up. She walked into exam room 2. He was sitting on the exam table, still in his jacket, his hands on his knees, older than the photograph, thinner than she remembered from 2018. The beard was gone. She hadn't expected that. And without it, he looked younger in one way and older in another, like a person who'd stopped performing a disguise and hadn't quite gotten used to his own face yet. He looked at her when she came through the door. She closed it behind her and stood there for a moment. Dale, she said. His jaw tightened. You know. I know the name's not Halverson, she said. I found out last night. They got to you first. They did, she said. I'm not going to lie to you about that. He watched her for a moment with the careful, slightly damaged attention of someone who'd been in a state of low-grade threat assessment for a long time. She recognized the posture. She'd worn it herself in the early years. Are they outside? He said. Not in the building, she said. I asked for space. They agreed. You asked? A flicker of something, not quite disbelief. And they want you to come in voluntarily, she said. They've figured out that forcing it doesn't work. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at her arm, at the mark, visible below the rolled sleeve of her clinic shirt. I went back, he said, to the 5th point. I know, she said. They told me. They told you about it? He sat forward. They told you there was a 5th. They read me in, she said. Last night, 5th extraction point, the source, the primary team that didn't make it. She paused. The name. The Admiral told me the name. Mercer's face did something complicated and difficult to look at. Then you know why I went back, he said. Tell me anyway, she said. In your words? He looked at the wall for a moment. His hands on his knees were not entirely steady. I heard the radio traffic during hour 31, he said. The primary team calling in their status. I heard them go quiet. I knew what that meant. He stopped. I knew who was at the 5th point. We all did. On some level. You hear things. You piece things together. I couldn't leave it. You went back alone, she said. I tried to get authorization first, he said. I went up the chain as fast as I could. They said the mission window was closed. They said the situation at the 5th point was being handled. But you didn't believe them. I knew what being handled meant, he said. I'd been in enough rooms. She heard the weight in that. She didn't push. What did you find? She said. He reached into his jacket. She watched his hands, not from fear, but from the trained attention of someone monitoring a person in distress. He pulled out a hard drive. Small, ruggedized, the kind designed for field conditions. He set it on the exam table beside him. I found this, he said. At the 5th point, the source was gone. No body, no sign of injury, just gone. The site had been cleaned, professionally cleaned. Someone had been there before me. He looked at the drive. This was the only thing left. It was hidden. Whoever cleaned the site missed it, or I don't know. Maybe they left it deliberately. I've never known for sure. What's on it? I don't know, he said. I've never been able to open it. The encryption it's not anything I've ever been able to crack, and I'm not bad at that sort of thing. He paused. I've been carrying it for 6 years. I've been trying to figure out who to trust with it for 6 years. She looked at the drive on the exam table. Why me? She said. Out of everyone. Because you were there, he said. Because you're the only person I was certain hadn't been compromised. The others... He stopped, started again. I didn't know where the others were. 2 of them I lost track of early. I found out about the 3rd 18 months ago. She heard the past tense in the way he'd said it. The 3rd, she said carefully. Tomas Reeve, Mercer said. You remember him? I remember him, she said. He died 14 months ago, Mercer said. Officially a hiking accident. Solo trip in Montana, fell on a trail that he'd hiked 12 times before. His voice stayed flat, but she heard what was underneath. I'd made contact with him 2 months before that. I told him about the 5th point, about the drive. A pause. I don't know if those things are connected. I've been terrified they are. The exam room was very quiet. She looked at the drive. She thought about the contractor who'd ended up dead. She thought about Tomas Reeve on a trail in Montana. You told the journalist, she said, the contractor. You were trying to create enough noise that whatever was being protected would become more expensive to protect than to expose. I was trying to create witnesses, he said, people who'd heard enough that I wasn't the only one who knew something happened, because I'd started to think that being the only one who knew was dangerous. It might still be, she said. I know, he said. That's why I'm here. She looked at him, at the thinness of him, the careful way he was holding himself together, the 6 years of carrying this written in the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there in 2018. The people who had the contractor's connections, she said. You think they know about the drive? I think they know something exists, he said. I don't think they know what. I don't think anyone knows what's on it, except maybe... He stopped. Except maybe the source, she said. If the source is alive, he said. She picked up the hard drive. It was lighter than she'd expected. She turned it over in her hands. This needs to go to Renner, she said. I know, he said. I know you know, she said. I'm saying it so we're clear about what happens next. He nodded. He looked like a person setting down something very heavy, which was exactly what he was. She set the drive on the table and reached for her phone. She was about to dial the contact number when she heard it. Footsteps in the clinic corridor, moving faster than clinic footsteps should, and a voice she didn't recognize saying something low and urgent to the front desk nurse. She put the phone face down on the table. She looked at Mercer. He'd heard it too. He'd gone very still in the way she recognized from the field. The particular stillness of someone whose body had decided to stop making noise before their mind had fully processed why. The footsteps stopped outside the door to exam room 2. Not Renner's team. She'd told them the building. Not the Admiral. He was 40 minutes away. She picked up the hard drive. The door handle moved. The door handle turned slowly, which was wrong. People who belonged in a clinic moved with the brisk, purposeful rhythm of people who had a reason to be there. They knocked, or they pushed straight through. They didn't turn the handle the way this one was being turned, with the careful testing pressure of someone who wasn't sure what they'd find on the other side. Olivia moved without thinking about it. She stepped to the left of the door, away from the hinge side, away from the direct line of entry, and put the hard drive in the pocket of her clinic jacket in the same motion. She looked at Mercer and held up one finger. He read it and stayed exactly where he was, which told her his training hadn't entirely rusted over in 6 years of running. The door opened. The man who stepped through was not in uniform and was not carrying anything visible. He was mid-40s, thick through the shoulders, with the close-cropped look of someone who'd been military once and had stayed in the habits without staying in the service. He wore a jacket that was slightly too heavy for the indoor temperature, which meant he was carrying something under it. He saw Mercer first. His eyes moved to Olivia half a second later. In that half second, she read everything she needed to read. "You're in the wrong room," she said. Her voice came out exactly right. Not aggressive, not frightened. The neutral authority of a medical professional who encountered confused visitors routinely. "Patient consultation. Can I help you find where you're going?" The man looked at her. He looked at Mercer. He did not look like someone who was going to be redirected by a polite suggestion. "I need to speak with the patient," he said. "You're not on his intake form," she said. "That means you're not authorized to be in this room during an exam. You'll need to wait in the main reception area." He took one step further into the room. She reached for the emergency call button on the wall beside the exam table, not reaching for it in a way that announced she was reaching for it, but reaching for it with the peripheral efficiency of someone who knew exactly where every piece of equipment in this room was. She pressed it once. "I'm not going to ask twice," she said. The man's jaw tightened. He looked at Mercer again. "David, let's go. Now." Mercer said very quietly, "I'm not going anywhere with you." "You don't have a choice about—" "He does have a choice," Olivia said. "He's a patient in this clinic, and he hasn't consented to your presence or to leaving with you. Whatever you think you're here to do, you're doing it in the wrong place." She looked at him steadily. "The button I just pressed calls the front desk and 2 staff members and logs a timestamp. Whatever happens in the next 90 seconds is on record." That landed. She saw it. A recalculation behind his eyes, fast and unhappy. He took one more look at Mercer. Then he stepped back through the door. She heard him moving down the corridor, but not running, walking, but at the pace of someone revising a plan rather than abandoning one. She waited 3 seconds, then went to the door and looked out. He was at the far end of the corridor, near the building's side exit. He pushed through it without looking back. The front desk nurse, a young man named Pryor, who had started 3 months ago and was still calibrating what constituted an emergency, appeared at the other end of the corridor. "Everything okay?" "We had an unauthorized visitor in exam 2, she said. "Can you call the building manager and ask them to check the side exit footage? Just for the record." "Sure," Pryor said, with the careful manner of someone adding this to the list of things about this job that were stranger than the job description had suggested. She went back into the room and closed the door. Mercer was on his feet. "Who is he?" "I don't know his name," she said, "but he knew yours, your alias, which means whoever is looking for the drive has been tracking you more closely than you realized." She already had her phone out. She dialed the contact number. Renner picked up on the second ring. "We have a problem," she said. "Someone just walked into the clinic, mid-40s, heavy build, carrying something under a gray jacket, used the side exit approximately 45 seconds ago. He's not yours." A pause. Short. "Are you secure?" "For the moment." "Don't move. We're 4 minutes out." She ended the call. Mercer was watching her. "You trust them," he said. Not an accusation, more like he was working something out. "Not entirely," she said. "But right now our interests are aligned, which is close enough." She looked at him. "When did you first notice you were being followed?" He sat back down on the exam table, not because he was calm, but because his legs were making the decision for him. 3 days ago, maybe earlier, and I missed it. I'd gotten sloppy." He said the last word with a specific, self-directed bitterness. "I thought I had more time." "You got here," she said. "That's what matters." "He would have come in 2 minutes later and he'd have had both of us," Mercer said. "But he didn't," she said. She went to the window, small ground-level view of the side parking lot, and looked out without making it obvious she was looking. The parking lot had 5 cars in it. One she didn't recognize from the morning. A dark blue sedan, nose in, positioned for a fast exit. Still there, engine running, she thought, though she couldn't confirm from this angle. She stepped back from the window. "The drive," Mercer said. "If they know enough to follow me here, they know the drive exists." "Probably," she said. "Then having it on you is better than leaving it on a table," she said. He went quiet. Outside in the corridor, the clinic was doing what clinics do. Phones, footsteps, the muffled sound of a waiting room conversation. Ordinary noise that felt surreal against the specific weight of this room. She stood with her back against the wall to the left of the door and waited. Renner arrived in 3 minutes and 40 seconds, which was better than 4. He came through the front entrance with 2 people she hadn't met, both plain clothes, both moving with the brisk intentionality that she'd wanted from the stranger in the gray jacket and hadn't gotten. He found exam room 2 without asking for directions, which meant he'd been working from a building schematic, which meant he'd been more prepared for today than he'd let on last night. She filed that away and said nothing about it. He looked at Mercer. Mercer looked back at him with the wariness of someone who'd been on the wrong end of official interest for long enough to have opinions about it. "Dale," Renner said. Not the alias, the name, carefully. "Mr. Renner," Mercer said. "I'm glad you're here," Renner said, and then, in a move that surprised her slightly, "I know that took a lot." Mercer looked at him for a moment. He didn't say anything, but something in his posture shifted by a degree. She pulled the hard drive from her pocket and held it out to Renner. He had this. It was at the 5th extraction point. He's been carrying it since March 2018. Renner looked at it. His expression didn't give much away, but she saw the controlled urgency beneath it. The discipline of a person who understood the significance of what they were looking at and was working very hard not to show how much. He took it carefully, held it. "We need to move," she said. "There's a blue sedan in the side lot. I believe the man from the corridor is still outside." Renner looked at one of the 2 people with him, a woman with cropped brown hair who was already on a radio, low and efficient. Within 20 seconds, she had information back, the sedan, a partial plate, and confirmation that a figure matching the description had been observed re-entering the vehicle approximately 3 minutes ago. "Still there?" Renner said. "Stationary," the woman confirmed. "Then we go out the front," Renner said. "Vehicles are on the street." He looked at Olivia. "You too." "I have patience." Pryor can handle triage and reschedule, he said. I need you in the room when we open this drive. You're the only one who can contextualize what's on it against the mission record. She looked at him. Please, he added, which cost him something, and she could tell. She went to find Pryor and gave him 3 minutes of clinical handoff, current patients, priority flags, the cardiologist's number for the follow-up. Pryor took it with commendable calm. She grabbed her coat from the staff room and came back. They left through the front. Buckhorn Federal Installation looked different in daylight, smaller somehow and more tired. The prefab structures that had seemed vaguely ominous at midnight were just prefab structures in the morning sun, the kind you saw on construction sites and military staging areas all over the country. The gravel crunched under the vehicles in a completely ordinary way. The difference today was the number of people. Last night had been Renner and Slate and 2 other officers. Today there were more. She counted 7 in the first building alone, and there were vehicles in the lot she hadn't seen before, including one with federal plates that didn't belong to the Office of Defense Intelligence. She noticed that. She noticed Renner noticing her noticing. A few additional stakeholders became aware of the situation this morning, he said. Became aware, she said. The contractor's death flag was elevated overnight. It triggered a broader review. She didn't ask how many agencies were now involved. She could see the answer taking shape in the room they were led to, larger than last night's, with a proper technical setup along one wall, 2 people who were clearly IT or encryption specialists working at a station that hadn't been there 12 hours ago, and Slate, who had the look of someone who'd been here all night and had run out of patience for pleasantries somewhere around 5 a.m. The Admiral was there too. He was standing at the far end of the room with a coffee that had probably gone cold, and when she came through the door, he looked at her with the particular relief of someone who'd been managing anxiety about something they couldn't control. "You're all right," he said. "I'm fine," she said. He looked at Mercer, who had come in behind her. The 2 men took each other in for a moment. The Admiral who'd spent 3 years trying to reclaim the record of a mission that had defined his career, and the 24-year-old specialist who was now 30 and had spent 6 years carrying a hard drive and a dead man's weight through 3 countries. "Specialist Mercer," the Admiral said. "Sir," Mercer said. Automatic. Some things apparently didn't entirely fade. The drive took 47 minutes to open. She knew it wasn't going to be fast. The encryption Mercer had described wasn't commercial, it was purpose-built, which meant the specialists were working backward from architectural principles rather than known keys. She sat in a chair against the wall and drank bad coffee and watched the room operate. Renner moved between the technical station and a phone call that he kept stepping out for. Slate reviewed documents at the main table. The Admiral stood, then sat, then stood again. Mercer sat across from her, and they didn't speak for a long time, which was its own kind of conversation. "Reeve," she said finally, quietly. Mercer looked at the floor. "I don't know for certain that it was connected." "But you think it was?" "I think someone has been managing this information for a long time," he said, "and the people who know too much have a pattern of—" He stopped. "I know how that sounds. It sounds like something I'd need to think about carefully before saying out loud," she said. "But I don't think you're wrong." He looked at his hands. He had the particular quality of someone who'd been alone with something for so long that sharing it didn't bring relief so much as a strange, disorienting lightness. The sudden absence of a weight you'd recalibrated your entire posture around. "I should have come to you sooner," he said. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe you needed to come when you came." One of the encryption specialists said something low to the other. Then she said louder, "We're in." The room stopped. Renner was back through the door in 4 seconds. Slate was on her feet. The Admiral moved to the technical station. The specialist turned the monitor so the room could see it. The drive contained 3 folders. The first 2 were what she'd expected. Operational files, Kurava Province, the kind of mission documentation that explained why the record had been sealed. She looked at it and understood, with the cold clarity of someone filling in pieces they'd been missing for years, exactly what the real objective of the mission had been. Not a rescue operation with an intelligence component. An intelligence operation with a rescue component. The medical extractions had been cover for getting a team into the region, and the 5 of them had been the cover's human face, which none of them had been told. She sat with that for a moment. She'd suspected something like it. Suspecting and knowing were different things. The Admiral beside her said nothing. His jaw was tight. The third folder had a single file, a video. The specialist opened it. The recording was poor quality, low light, handheld, the kind of footage made on a device that was never meant to be a camera. It showed the interior of a structure she didn't recognize, a single lamp in the corner and a person sitting against the wall. She recognized the person, the name the Admiral had given her last night, the source at the fifth extraction point, alive, in the recording at least. Speaking directly into the camera with the measured clarity of someone who understood this might be the only chance they'd have to speak, and was choosing each word accordingly. She watched the full 8 minutes without looking away. By the end, the room was completely silent. The recording identified by name the command-level officer who had made the decision to exclude the fifth extraction point from the field team's briefing. The same officer who had authorized the mission window to be closed before the primary team could reach the source. The same officer who had, according to the source, been compromised, had been feeding information to a foreign intelligence service for approximately 18 months, and had designed the mission's actual structure to ensure the intelligence assets at the fifth point never came back. The name in the recording was not a minor one. Renner sat down in a chair that happened to be nearby. It looked involuntary. Slate was on her feet and already on a phone she'd produced from somewhere. Her voice was low and extremely controlled, and she had the expression of someone dealing with the gap between what they'd expected to find and what was actually in front of them. Not panic, but the rapid, precise recalibration of a professional hitting a situation that exceeded their brief. The Admiral said, beside her very quietly, "I know that name." "I know," she said. He stopped, started again. "He's been involved in the recognition review process. He had access to every inquiry I filed." She looked at him. She watched that land across his face. The 3 years of documentation, of appeals, of careful bureaucratic effort, all of it potentially visible to the person who'd had the most reason to want it buried. "That's why it kept stalling," she said. "Yes," he said. His voice had gone flat in a way that was worse than anger. Mercer was watching the monitor. He hadn't spoken since the video started. He looked like someone who had been holding a locked box for 6 years and had just watched someone open it and find exactly what they'd feared and exactly what they'd hoped, both simultaneously, which was not a comfortable thing to experience. "The source," he said. "In the recording, is that the most recent footage?" The specialist checked the file metadata. "Timestamp on the recording is approximately 36 hours after the end of your unit's operational window," she said. 36 hours after. The mission had been called at 72 hours, which meant the recording was made 6 hours into the period when Command had declared the situation at the fifth point resolved, when a living person had been left in that structure with a camera and enough presence of mind to document everything they knew. "If that's 36 hours in," Mercer said, "and the site was cleaned before I got there." "They cleaned the site but missed the drive," Olivia said. "Which means they thought they had everything," Mercer said. "They thought they'd closed it." "But the source had already hidden the drive before they arrived," she said. The shape of it assembled fully in the room. The source, knowing what was coming, had put the documentation on the drive and hidden it where someone might find it. Where one specific person had found it, because he'd gone back when he wasn't supposed to, because 24-year-old Dale Mercer had heard the radio go quiet and couldn't live with leaving it. Slate came back to the table. She looked at Renner, then at Olivia, then at the Admiral. "We need to move on this immediately," she said. "The name in the recording, we can't let this sit. If he knows about Mercer surfacing, if he knows about last night," "He knows," the Admiral said. "He has access to my inquiry filings, which means he potentially knows about the contact with Ms. Hart." "He knew we were at the clinic this morning," Olivia said. "The man in the gray jacket. That wasn't random." Renner looked at her sharply. "You think he was directed there?" "I think someone knew where Mercer was going and sent someone ahead," she said. "If that came from inside this investigation—" "It didn't come from inside this team," Slate said, with a precision that meant she'd already considered it. "But it could have come from someone monitoring the Admiral's communications," Olivia said. "If he's had ongoing access, then we assume our timeline is compromised," Renner said. He was back to being decisive, which she appreciated. The 30 seconds of sitting down involuntarily appeared to be over. We move today. We go to JAG with the recording. We go to the Inspector General, and we flag it to 3 separate offices simultaneously so no single point of authority can delay or redirect. He'll know it's coming, Slate said. The moment the first contact is made, he'll know. Then we move fast enough that it doesn't matter, Renner said. She thought about the man in the gray jacket, the blue sedan in the clinic parking lot, the contractor, dead in a manner officially ruled natural, Tomas Reeve on a trail in Montana. He's going to move first, she said. Everyone in the room looked at her. He's been managing this for 6 years, she said. He knows the drive exists. Maybe not exactly, but he knows something came out of the 5th point because Mercer came out of the 5th point, and Mercer has been visible enough. He sent someone to the clinic this morning because he couldn't afford to let Mercer and the drive land somewhere he couldn't control. She looked at Renner. He knows it didn't work. That means right now, while we're sitting here, he's making calls. Renner and Slate exchanged a look. Who handles his communications currently? The Admiral said. That's what we need to determine, Renner said, already moving toward the door. The next 2 hours were not dramatic in the way movies were dramatic. They were the concentrated, grinding, procedurally detailed work of people trying to build an airtight structure faster than someone else could knock it down. Renner was on a series of calls. Slate was processing the recording through a verification protocol that she explained briefly to the room and then executed without asking for input. 2 additional officers arrived from a direction Olivia didn't fully track. She sat with Mercer at the end of the main table and went through the operational timeline, verbally for a recorder, filling in every detail she carried from Kurova province that might map onto the mission documents now open on the table. It was not an easy exercise. Some of the memories were precise, time-stamped by crisis, the way certain things were. Others were blurred by the particular mercy of exhaustion and shock. She gave what she had accurately and said clearly when she was uncertain, because uncertain testimony offered as certain testimony was how cases fell apart, and she was not going to let that happen. The Admiral sat to her left for most of this and added his own recollections where they intersected. There were moments when their memories diverged, small things, sequencing, a detail of timing, and they worked through it without either of them pretending the other was wrong. It was not comfortable work. It was necessary work. By early afternoon, Renner had made the simultaneous contacts he'd described. 3 offices, the JAG referral, the IG flag, and a 3rd channel that he identified only as oversight, and which she understood from his tone to be at a level above the usual chain. Then he came back into the main room and stood at the head of the table and said, "He's been detained." The room absorbed that. "At his office?" the Admiral said. "At his residence," Renner said. "He was in the process of—" He paused, choosing the word. "Organizing his files when the team arrived," which meant destroying them, or trying to. "He had 30 minutes, Slate said from across the room without looking up. "Maybe 40. Anything he got rid of in that window is a problem." "The recording stands independent of his files," Renner said. "The recording is 8 minutes of a source describing his conduct," Slate said. "We need corroboration." "We have the contractor's history," Renner said. "The timeline of communications, the pattern of inquiry delays in the Admiral's case." He looked at Olivia. "And we have the testimony of the mission personnel." She thought about testimony, about sitting in a formal setting and describing what she'd done in Kurova province, and what she hadn't known, and what had been done with the mission she'd participated in without her full knowledge. She thought about what it would cost, not in legal terms, not in practical terms, but in the internal terms of a person who'd spent 6 years building a life around the decision to set something down and not look back. She'd thought she was done carrying it. She looked at Mercer, who was watching her with the expression of someone who'd made his own version of this calculation and come out the other side of it looking like he did now, tired and present and still there. "I'll testify," she said. Mercer said quietly, "So will I." The Admiral made a sound that wasn't quite words. He put his hand flat on the table for a moment, a grounding gesture, she thought, the kind people made when they needed the surface to be solid. The room moved around them. Files, phones, the technical station continuing its work, two officers going in and out of the door with the compressed energy of a situation that had shifted from investigation to action. It was Slate who said it first, coming to the table with a tablet and setting it down in front of Olivia without preamble. "There's one more thing," she said. Olivia looked at the tablet. It was a communication record, time-stamped. The most recent entry was 43 minutes ago. A message sent from the detained officer's personal device, 19 minutes before his residence was reached, to a recipient whose information had been partially scrubbed. The message was 4 words. "The source is alive." 4 words. Olivia read them twice and then set the tablet down because holding it wasn't going to change what it said. The source is alive. The room had gone the specific quality of quiet that happens when a group of professionals receive information that requires them to rebuild their understanding of a situation they thought they had contained. Renner was standing very still. Slate had picked up the tablet and was reading the message with the focused attention of someone trying to extract more meaning from 4 words than 4 words typically held. The Admiral said from his place at the table, "He sent that before he knew they were coming for him." 19 minutes before, Slate confirmed. "Then it wasn't a warning to the recipient," the Admiral said. "It was a threat." Olivia looked at him. "If the source is alive," the Admiral said carefully, "and the detained officer knew it before we did, then he's been sitting on that information, using it somehow, and in the last minutes before he was reached, he sent it to someone." He paused. "Not to warn them, to activate them." The room absorbed that. She thought about the 8-minute video. The source, sitting against a wall in poor light, speaking clearly and without visible panic. 36 hours into an abandoned mission. What had happened after the recording ended, after the drive was hidden and the site was cleaned, was a question that the video didn't answer and the files didn't address. The source could have been extracted by the people who cleaned the site, could have been held somewhere, could have spent 6 years in a situation that had no paperwork, no official record, no existence in any document she'd read today. "Where's the source?" she said. "We don't know," Renner said. "Then that's the problem," she said. "Everything else? The detention, the recording, the testimony? It's all the right work. But if the source is alive and someone just received a message telling them to move, then there's a clock." Renner was already on the phone before she finished the sentence. Slate was beside him with the tablet, and the two of them were doing the compressed low-voice coordination of people who understood exactly what she'd just said and didn't need her to say it again. Mercer had been quiet for several minutes. She looked at him and found him looking at the table with an expression she recognized, the specific weight of someone who just had a years-long fear confirmed in the worst and best possible way simultaneously. "He was looking for you," she said quietly. "Mercer. The source. He sent you toward me through the clinic because he knew you were searching for the drive. And he knew the drive would eventually lead here," Mercer said. "Yes." He looked up. "I think he's been managing it from wherever he is, slowly, carefully. He couldn't surface directly because surfacing directly would have gotten him killed before the information went anywhere useful." A pause. "I think the drive was always meant to end up with someone who could do something with it." She thought about that. A person in an unknown location, engineering a 6-year chain of events from a position of complete invisibility, feeding information to Mercer obliquely through channels she couldn't trace yet, staying hidden until the documentation was somewhere it couldn't be suppressed. It was either the most patient strategy she'd ever heard of, or a survival mechanism that had calcified into something resembling strategy over years of having no other options. Either way, it had worked. Renner came back to the table. "We've initiated a trace on the message recipient. It's going to take time." The scrubbing on the address was professional. "How much time?" she said. "Hours? Not days," he said. "We think. And in those hours, whoever received that message." "We know," Renner said. "We're working it." She stood up. Her back ached from the chair, and her head ached from the information, and she was aware, in the distant way of someone who'd been running on adrenaline since last night, that she hadn't eaten anything since the coffee that morning. "I need some air," she said. Nobody stopped her. She walked out of the main room, down the narrow corridor, and out through the front entrance of the building into the afternoon. The sun was lower than she'd expected. She'd lost track of time inside, which happened in rooms with no windows and too much to process. She stood on the gravel and looked at the flat Colorado landscape surrounding the installation. Brown grass, distant ridgeline, the particular kind of sky that came in November when the light went thin and golden before dropping away. She heard the door behind her, footsteps on gravel. The Admiral came and stood beside her. He didn't say anything immediately. "How are you doing?" he said finally. "I don't know yet," she said. "That's honest." "I'm usually honest," she said, "even when it's not useful." He was quiet for a moment. A vehicle moved on the access road beyond the fence, one of the federal plates heading out toward the main road with the particular urgency of people who had somewhere to be. "I want to say something," the Admiral said. She waited. "When I filed the first recognition inquiry," he said, 3 years ago, "I told myself it was about the record, about historical accuracy, getting the paperwork right." He paused. "But the truth is I've been carrying Curva Province the same way you have, the same way Mercer has. I had access to institutional channels, which meant I got to feel like I was doing something. That's not the same as actually doing it." "You kept trying," she said. "I kept filing papers," he said, "which is easier than admitting that the mission was wrong in ways I didn't see at the time, that I signed off on operational structures that I was told were sound, and I didn't ask the right questions." He looked at the ridgeline. "I've been angry at the person in that detention for a long time, but I was in the same room as him once. I believed what he told me. That's not his failure alone." She let that sit. "Nobody gets to be entirely clean of it," she said. "That's the thing about situations like Curva Province. The wrongdoing doesn't stay neatly contained to the person who designed it. It spreads, because people trusted the wrong thing, or didn't push hard enough, or just needed it to be simpler than it was." She paused. "Including me. I knew something was wrong with the mission structure. I felt it. I focused on my patients, and I didn't push because I told myself it wasn't my job." "You were there to save lives," he said. "Yes," she said, "and the people who design those situations count on that, on the fact that people with specific jobs stay in their lane." She exhaled. "I don't think I would have been able to expose what you've exposed today. I don't have access to those channels, but I could have asked harder questions 6 years ago." "So could I," he said. They stood with it. Not comfortable, not resolved, just present with it, which was different. "The recognition ceremony," she said. "Does it still happen?" "Given everything, it happens," the Admiral said. "The people who did the work are not implicated by the wrongdoing of the person who misused it. If anything," he stopped. "If anything, what came out today makes it more important, not less." She nodded. She didn't say anything else about it. They went back inside. Gut. The trace on the message recipient took 4 hours and 11 minutes, which Renner described as fast and Slate described as acceptable, and Olivia experienced as a sustained low-level tension that she managed by going through the remaining mission documents systematically and helping Mercer fill in the gaps in his own timeline for the formal record. It was useful work. It kept her hands busy. It kept the waiting from becoming something she'd have to name. When Renner came back into the room at 7:43 in the evening, she read the result on his face before he said it. "We found him," Renner said. He was not looking at her. He was looking at Mercer. "He's in the United States," Renner said. "Has been for approximately 9 months. He's been living under a second alias managed by an NGO with connections to the same foreign intelligence services the contractor was linked to." A pause. "We believe those connections were coerced. The NGO was covering him, but not voluntarily." "Is he safe?" Mercer said. "He's currently secure," Renner said. "Our people reached him approximately 40 minutes ago, before the recipient of the message could act on it." The 40 minutes of margin. She thought about the 19-minute head start the detained officer had tried to buy. It hadn't been enough. "He wants to meet with you," Renner said. He was still looking at Mercer. Then he glanced at Olivia. "Both of you." The meeting happened the following morning in a different facility, one that was softer in its construction than Buckhorn. Actual windows, carpet in the corridors, the general atmosphere of a place designed to make difficult conversations slightly less brutal by putting them in rooms with natural light. The source was a man in his late 50s named Arjan Voss. He was thin in the way of someone who'd spent years in conditions with inconsistent food supply, and he had the particular quality of stillness she'd come to associate with people who'd survived long periods of sustained threat by learning to take up as little space as possible. But his eyes were sharp and present, and when he shook her hand, his grip was firm. He looked at the mark on her forearm for a moment. "I know what that is," he said. "I know," she said. They sat across from each other at a table that had a window behind it showing a courtyard with a single bare tree. Mercer sat beside her. Renner and Slate were in the room, but positioned back from the table, present as required and otherwise absent. Voss looked at Mercer for a long moment. "You went back?" he said. "Yes," Mercer said. "I heard you. On the second day. I heard movement outside the structure, and I didn't know who it was, and I—" He stopped. He looked at his hands. "I didn't call out. I was afraid of who it might be." Mercer looked at him. "I didn't hear you either," he said. "I thought the site was clear." "I know," Voss said. "I've thought about that for 6 years. The 30 seconds where I heard movement and I stayed quiet." He was still looking at his hands. "I've had a long time to think about it." "So have I," Mercer said. "I've thought about walking away from that site for 6 years." Something passed between them. Not absolution, not resolution, but recognition. The kind that only happens between people who've been shaped by the same event from different sides of it. "The drive," Voss said, looking at Olivia. "It reached the right people." "It did," she said. "I hit it well enough that they missed it," he said. There was no pride in his voice, just the bare fact of it. "I didn't know if it would ever be found. I recorded everything I knew, and I hid the drive, and then I waited to see what happened next." He paused. "For 6 years, I waited." She thought about that, about what 6 years of waiting looked like, from inside the situation he'd been in. She didn't say anything because there was nothing to say that would be adequate. "What happens now?" he said to Renner. "Now," Renner said, from his position against the wall, "we work through the formal process. Your testimony, the recording, the mission documents, the communication record from the detention. It's not fast, but it's complete." "And the man who designed it," Voss said. "He's facing a federal indictment," Slate said. "Multiple charges. Given the scope of what the documentation supports, the intelligence compromise, the abandonment of personnel, the subsequent management of information," she paused. "He will not be returning to any position of authority." Voss nodded slowly. He looked like someone filing that information in a place that would take time to fully process. "He had 18 months on us," the Admiral said. He'd been quiet since they'd entered the room. He built the mission to fail at the right point and succeed at the right other point, and he had 18 months of access before anyone started looking at the structure. He paused. But he didn't account for the people. Everyone in the room looked at him. "He built the structure," the Admiral said. "He couldn't build the people. He couldn't make Mercer follow orders to stand down. He couldn't make Ms. Hart stay in her lane. He couldn't make Voss stay quiet and disappear." He looked around the room. The part he got wrong was assuming that people with small roles would stay in them when it mattered. She heard that. She let it land fully instead of deflecting it. He was right. And he was also describing the thing she'd spent 6 years telling herself was nothing. That the work she'd done in Karava province, the refusal to let people die even when the conditions for saving them were nearly impossible, had ultimately created the thread that unraveled everything. Not because she'd been exceptional, because she'd been present, because she'd stayed. The formal recognition ceremony happened 17 days later. She'd expected something large and public, the kind of event designed to make an institution look good in a difficult moment. What she got was smaller and more honest. A room at a military administrative building in Denver, 40 people, no press. The Admiral had been clear about that from the start. This was for the people who'd done the work, not for the record's public rehabilitation. She wore civilian clothes. She hadn't owned a uniform in years and saw no reason to pretend otherwise. Mercer came in a jacket that looked like he'd bought it recently and wasn't entirely comfortable in it, which felt right. The second confirmed member of the original unit, a woman named Petra Dahl, who'd been working as a trauma surgeon in Phoenix and had the manner of someone who'd assembled a full life out of the aftermath and was cautious about disrupting it, arrived late and sat at the end of the row without apologizing. Voss was there. He sat near the back. She hadn't expected that. When she saw him, she realized she'd been wrong to not expect it. Of course he was there. He was the reason there was anything to recognize. The Admiral spoke briefly. He did not give the speech she'd anticipated, the formal recitation of acts performed and honors due. He talked about the gap between what institutions record and what actually happened, about the way that gap gets used sometimes by people who understand that what isn't written down can be made not to exist, about the specific courage required to keep going in a situation where the institutional record is working against the truth, you know. He didn't make it about her. He made it about all of them, which was more accurate and more useful and harder to sit with, which meant it was the right call. When he presented the commendations, 4 of them, the 4th for Tomas Reeve given posthumously to a notation in the formal record that would be preserved, she stood and accepted hers and shook his hand and did not perform any particular emotion about it. She felt something. She wasn't going to pretend she didn't. Standing there with the weight of it in her hands, in a room full of people who knew what it represented, after 6 years of carrying the work without any version of this, she felt something that she didn't have an easy name for. Not vindication, exactly. Not closure. More like correction. Like a thing that had been crooked for a long time had been straightened, and the straightening was not dramatic, it was just true. Mercer was beside her when it was his turn. He took the commendation and held it and looked at it for a moment with the expression of someone not sure what to do with their hands. And then he looked up and found Voss at the back of the room and held eye contact for a few seconds and then looked away. Nobody made a speech about it. It didn't need one. Mason Vance had asked, through Kowalski, if he could attend. She'd been surprised by that, more surprised that Kowalski had been the one to pass it along. So Kowalski, who had gotten a polite follow-up call from the clinic about his recovery, and had apparently, in the 10 days since that Friday night, done some thinking about what had happened in that bar. She'd said yes. To both of them. They sat in the back, out of uniform, and they didn't say anything during the ceremony. Afterward, when people were dispersing and the room was breaking into the small, sideways conversations that happen when intensity deflated, Vance found her near the door. He looked different from the man who'd been performing ease at the corner table of the Anchor and Nail. The ease was still there. It was structural in him, probably always would be, but it was quieter, less deployed. "I don't know how to do this right," he said. "Most people don't," she said. "I said something about your tattoo that I can't take back," he said, "and I can't explain it away as being drunk because I've said things like that when I was sober to people I decided weren't worth the full version of my attention." He paused. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know I know that." She looked at him for a moment. "What you said about the tattoo wasn't the worst thing that's ever been said about it," she told him. "I've had worse from people who should have known better." She paused. "The difference between you and them is you're standing here." He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more and had learned enough in the last 17 days to know when not to. Kowalski was behind him, a half step back, still carrying the slight caution of someone recently post-anaphylaxis. He didn't say anything. He just nodded at her, which meant something different from what a nod usually meant, and she nodded back, which meant she understood. They left. She stood near the door for a moment after they were gone. Petra Dahl came and stood beside her with a cup of coffee that looked like it had come from the same institutional urn that Buckhorn used, which was to say, it was terrible. "You going back to Ravenport?" Petra said. "Eventually," Olivia said. "You going back to Phoenix?" "Tomorrow morning," Petra said. "I have a surgery at 7. "Good," Olivia said. "Is it?" Petra said, with the particular dry quality of a person who'd been holding a complex feeling about her ordinary life for the past 3 weeks. "You built something real," Olivia said. "That's good." "So did you," Petra said. "Different materials, same thing." She thought about that. The Anchor and Nail with its flood-prone parking lot and its 3 kinds of bourbon. The clinic with its flickering fluorescent bulb in the staff room, and prior learning the job and the woman with the blood pressure reading who needed her cardiologist called. The apartment above the laundromat with the glass of water on the bedside table. Small, ordinary. Built by hand, slowly, in the years after a mission that had tried to unmake her. Yeah, she said. Same thing. Mercer found her before she left the building. He stood with her in the corridor for a moment, just the two of them, the room behind them still carrying the low murmur of people who'd spent an hour in shared wait and weren't quite ready to put it down. I don't know what I do now, he said. You don't have to know yet, she said. The alias, the NGO situation, He stopped. I've been in a mode for 6 years. I don't know what the other mode feels like. It feels uncomfortable for a while, she said, and then it starts to feel like yours. He looked at her. Did it? For you? She thought about it honestly, which was the only way she knew how to think about it. It took longer than I wanted, she said, and there are still days, but mostly, yes, it feels like mine. He nodded. He looked down at the commendation in his hand. Reeve would have hated this ceremony, he said. He would have complained the whole time, she said, and then gone to the bar afterward and talked about it for 3 hours. Yes, she said. They stood with that for a moment. Not grief, exactly, or grief that had been sitting long enough to be something more than just grief. The kind of remembering that keeps a person present in the world rather than erasing them from it. The bar has 3 kinds of bourbon, she said. In case you ever come through Ravenport. He almost smiled. I'll keep that in mind. She drove back to Ravenport alone. 4 hours, the plains going dark around her, the headlights steady on the road ahead. She listened to nothing. No radio, no podcasts, just the sound of the engine and the wind and the occasional thud of a bug against the windshield that reminded her the world continued operating according to its usual indifferent logic. She thought about Voss, who was beginning the long process of reestablishing an identity in a country that had officially not known he was there. She thought about the detained officer, a name she didn't speak, even in her own head, because she'd given enough of her interior space to people who'd used authority badly, and she was done doing it for free. His indictment was proceeding. His access to every file, every inquiry, every name connected to Karava province had been severed and audited. The specific architecture of damage he'd built over 18 months was being dismantled with the methodical thoroughness of institutions that move slowly but don't stop. It was not a story with a clean ending. Clean endings were for people who hadn't been paying attention. The legal process would take time. Some of what was lost, Reeve, the years, the things that couldn't be restored by paperwork, would stay lost. That was the real shape of it, but the record had been corrected. And the thing she kept coming back to, in the 4 hours of the drive in the flat dark of the plains, was not the ceremony or the commendation or any of the institutional acknowledgement that had taken years and a hard drive and a man who couldn't stop going back for it. What she kept coming back to was the exam room, the door handle turning, her hand already moving. Not because she'd been waiting for someone to validate what she could do, not because she'd needed the moment to prove something. She'd moved because there was a person in danger and she knew how to help, and that was what you did. You used what you had, where you were, for whoever needed it. You didn't wait for the moment to be worthy of what you'd learned. That was the thing she'd spent 6 years understanding and couldn't have said in words until now. The work wasn't diminished by being ordinary. The bar, the clinic, the small town, none of it had been a lesser version of a bigger life. It had been the life. The same care applied to a patient in anaphylaxis that had applied to a wounded soldier in Karava province. The same hands, the same training, the same decision to stay present in a situation that was asking for more than was comfortable to give. You didn't have to be in a classified location to matter. You just had to be in the room. She pulled into Ravenport at 10:30. The strip of commercial blocks, the overpass, the familiar dark of streets that had wound down for the night. She parked outside the laundromat and sat in the car for a moment. She looked at the mark on her forearm in the dashboard light. It was still the same mark, still angular and asymmetric, made by shaking hands in poor light under conditions that had no right to produce anything lasting. It had been mocked and misread and used as a punchline and used as a recognition code and used as a reminder of things she'd worked very hard to set down. She was done trying to set it down. It was hers. All of it. The mark, the mission, the years, the work she'd done in a bar in Ravenport for 2 years and 3 months, and what was now 18 days, caring for people who mostly didn't know her name and didn't need to. It was all the same thing. She got out of the car. The cold hit her. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment and let it. Then she went inside. She refilled the glass of water on the bedside table. She lay down on the mattress and looked at the ceiling and did her 30 seconds. For the first time in 6 years, the 30 seconds ended before she expected them to. She closed her eyes. There's a particular kind of person who does the hardest work in the quietest rooms and never asks you to know about it, who shows up without announcing it, who holds the weight without naming it, who carries other people's crises with steadier hands than should be possible under those conditions. The world runs on such people. It always has. They are not invisible because they are unimportant. They are invisible because the work they do has no obvious uniform, no visible title, no ceremony timed for an audience. The recognition, when it finally comes, is real, but it is not the point. It was never the point. The point was the work itself. The decision, made in ordinary moments and impossible ones alike, to be present for the person in front of you and to use everything you have. That decision doesn't require anyone's permission. It never did.